Blood streaked the cabin floor as 4 wolves tore through the night, their howls a haunting cry that wasn't just rage, but grief, like a funeral song for a child they'd die to save. Why would wild beasts risk everything for a little girl they shouldn't even know? In Pinewood Valley, where wolves are hunted as demons, one shocking night revealed a bond deeper than anyone dared imagine. Help us unravel this mystery. Subscribe now and join us to hit 1,000 subscribers for more stories that'll grip your soul. The night was black as coal over Pinewood Valley, Montana, a remote speck of civilization cradled between jagged mountains and endless forests. It was late October 2020, and the wind carried a bitter chill that rattled the windows of Abigail Abby Harper's weathered wooden cabin. Inside, the flickering glow of a single lantern cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the frail figure of Abby, a 72-year-old widow with silver hair tied in a loose bun, and her 5-year-old granddaughter, Lily Harper. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, her dark curls framing a pale face, her hazel eyes wide with the innocence of youth, yet shadowed by a quiet sorrow that lingered since her parents' death in a car crash years before. The peace shattered like glass when the cabin door exploded inward, splintering under the force of a heavy boot. 3 masked men stormed inside, their silhouettes looming like specters against the dim light. The tallest wore a black ski mask, his voice a guttural snarl as he barked, "She knows too much! Kill them both before they get here!" Abby stumbled to her feet, her arthritic hands trembling as she shoved Lily behind her. "Stay back!" she cried, her voice cracking with defiance, despite the fear etched into every wrinkle on her face. The second intruder, shorter and wiry, swung a crowbar that caught Abby across the temple. She crumpled to the floor, blood seeping from the wound, pooling on the cold planks as Lily screamed, a piercing, desperate wail that sliced through the night. The third man lunged for Lily, his gloved hand outstretched, but he froze mid-step. A low, rumbling growl rolled through the cabin, vibrating the walls like distant thunder. From the shadows beyond the broken door, 4 massive shapes materialized. Timber wolves, their fur glinting silver and gray in the lantern's faint glow. Their amber eyes burned like embers, fixed on the intruders with a fury that was both primal and eerily deliberate. The leader, a towering beast with a scarred muzzle and a coat like molten steel, stepped forward. Titan, as Lily would later name him, bared his teeth in a snarl that promised death. What followed was chaos. The tall man swung a hunting knife at Titan, slicing into the wolf's chest. Blood sprayed across the floor, a crimson arc that stained the wood, but Titan didn't falter. He lunged with explosive force, jaws clamping around the man's arm. The intruder screamed, a sound cut short as Titan's teeth tore through muscle and bone. The other 2 men scrambled for their weapons, but the wolves were faster. Nova, a sleek female with a white streak across her chest, leaped onto the wiry man, her claws raking his back as he fell. Blaze, broad and muscular, tackled the third, pinning him to the ground with a growl that rattled the windows. Raven, the smallest but swiftest, darted between them, snapping at heels and sowing panic. But it wasn't just their ferocity that chilled the air. It was their howls. As they fought, the wolves unleashed a chorus of cries that weren't mere roars of aggression. They were haunting, mournful, a symphony of sorrow that pierced the night like a widow's lament. Titan staggered, blood dripping from his wound, yet he positioned himself between Lily and the chaos, his amber eyes locking onto hers. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A vow, a plea, a connection that defied reason. "Run!" his gaze seemed to scream, though his jaws were locked on his prey. Lily, tears streaming down her face, crawled toward her grandmother's motionless form. "Grammy, wake up!" she sobbed, shaking Abby's shoulder. The tall man, arm mangled and useless, staggered to his feet, his voice a ragged gasp. "Where the hell did these monsters come from?" he shouted, fumbling for a pistol with his good hand. Before he could aim, Titan launched again, slamming him against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor as the wolf's jaws found his throat, silencing him forever. The other two intruders, battered and bleeding, fled into the night, their screams fading into the wind. The cabin fell silent, save for the labored breathing of the wolves and Lily's soft whimpers. Titan collapsed beside her, his massive head resting near her trembling hands. She reached out, her tiny fingers brushing his blood-matted fur, and whispered, "Titan, you saved us." Nova, Blaze, and Raven gathered around, their howls softening into a low, mournful keen, a sound that seemed to weep for the violence they'd unleashed, for the lives they'd taken, for something lost long ago. Abby stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open to see the wolves encircling her granddaughter, not as predators, but as guardians. The lantern flickered out, plunging the room into darkness, and the voiceover broke the silence. No one in Pinewood Valley could have imagined wolves would risk their lives for a human child, let alone cry while doing it. But this wasn't a random act of nature. 5 years earlier, a little girl with nothing left to lose made a choice that would echo through time, binding her fate to a pack of outcasts. How did it all begin? Stick around to find out, and hit that like button if you're already hooked. The screen paused on Titan's amber eyes, blood dripping from his chest, staring into Lily's tear-streaked face. A frozen moment of loyalty and mystery. "And hey," the voice continued, "do you think animals can feel love or even vengeance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, along with the city you're watching from. Let's get this debate rolling." Pinewood Valley wasn't just another dot on the map of rural Montana. It was a fortress carved from wilderness, a place where the mountains loomed like sentinels and the forests whispered secrets older than the town itself. Settled in 1887 by hardy pioneers, the village had forged its identity around a single, unyielding truth. Wolves were the enemy. In the town square, a bronze statue of the founder, Ezekiel Dawson, stood proud. Rifle in hand, one boot planted triumphantly on a wolf's carcass, its glass eyes frozen in eternal defeat. Every November, the Hunters' Festival filled the streets with tales of cunning killers stalking the shadows, of livestock lost and children snatched from their beds. The taxidermy shop on Main Street boasted a grim gallery, dozens of wolf heads mounted on plaques, their snarls preserved as trophies of conquest. To the people of Pinewood, wolves weren't just animals, they were demons to be vanquished. Yet beneath the bravado lingered an older story, one the elders rarely spoke of aloud. The legend of the soul wolves claimed that some wolves carried the spirits of the dead, truants of the wild who howled to warn of danger or cry for vengeance. Their eerie wails were said to echo through the valley on moonless nights, a sound so mournful it could stop a hunter's heart. But such tales were dismissed as superstition, relics of a softer time before rifles ruled the land. By 2015, when our story begins, the soul wolves were little more than a ghost story, buried under a century of blood and gunpowder. Lily Harper didn't fit in Pinewood Valley. At 5 years old, she was an outsider in a town that prized conformity above all else. Orphaned 2 years earlier when her parents' car plunged off an icy cliff on Mountain Pass Road, officially a tragic accident, though whispers of foul play lingered, she'd been raised by her grandmother, Abigail "Abby" Harper. Abby was a fixture in the valley, a silver-haired woman with hands gnarled by arthritis, but a spirit unbroken by decades of hardship. She baked pies that won blue ribbons at the county fair and kept a small cabin at the edge of town, a world apart from the bustle of Main Street. Lily, though, was different. She rarely spoke above a whisper, preferred the solitude of the forest to the chatter of other children, and had a habit of staring into the trees as if they called her name. Some said she was touched after surviving the crash that took her parents. Abby simply called her special. That spring morning in 2015 began like any other. Lily slipped out of the cabin at dawn, a peanut butter sandwich tucked in her jacket pocket, her small boots barely leaving a mark on the damp earth. She had a secret spot, a fallen oak spanning Willow Creek, where deer sipped water in the early light. She could sit there for hours, still as a statue, watching the world unfold. But that day the forest felt wrong. The usual chatter of birds was gone, replaced by a silence so thick it prickled her skin. Then came the cracks, sharp staccato bursts echoing through the trees. Gunshots. Hunting season was months away, but Lily knew some men ignored the rules, especially when it came to wolves. Drawn by a pull she couldn't name, Lily ventured deeper into the woods than ever before, her small figure weaving through mist that parted like a curtain. She followed a faint game trail up a ridge, her heart pounding as the shots faded and men's voices rose in their place, laughter rough and triumphant. Hiding behind a gnarled pine, she peered into a clearing 50 yards ahead. 3 hunters stood over a fallen shape, their rifles slung over their shoulders. She recognized the tallest by his limp, Caleb "Cal" Dawson, a third-generation hunter whose hatred for wolves ran bone-deep since his son's death 12 years ago. "Got the mother," Cal said, nudging the gray form with his boot. "Biggest female I've seen in years." Another man grinned, scanning the trees. "Think there are cubs nearby?" Cal shrugged. "If there are, they won't last long without her. Nature'll sort it out." Lily held her breath as the men trudged off, their voices fading into the wind. Only then did she creep forward, her sneakers sinking into the soft earth. The she-wolf lay on her side, her silver-gray coat matted with blood where bullets had torn through her flesh. Her amber eyes stared blankly at the sky, lifeless yet majestic. Lily had never seen a wolf up close. The museum's mounted heads didn't count. Despite the village's teachings, she felt no fear, only a wrenching sadness that clenched her chest. Then she saw it. A faint X scarred into the wolf's ear, old and deliberate, like a brand from another life. A soft whimper broke her trance. Beneath a rocky outcrop nearby, 4 tiny forms huddled in a hollow. Wolf cubs, their eyes barely open, their bodies trembling with cold and hunger. Without their mother, they'd die within days. The village mantra echoed in her mind, "The only good wolf is a dead wolf." But as Lily looked at them, something fierce stirred inside her. Orphans, like her, abandoned by a world that didn't care. She shed her jacket, laying it on the ground, and one by one lifted the cubs onto the fabric. They were heavier than she'd expected, their fur warm against her hands. Tying the sleeves into a sling, she whispered, "It's okay. I lost my mom and dad too. I won't let you go." The walk home was slow, her arms aching under the weight. Twice she ducked behind bushes as villagers passed nearby, their chatter oblivious to her secret. By the time she reached Abby's cabin, the sun hung low, and she knew her grandmother would be frantic. The cellar became their refuge, a hillside dugout with an external door Abby rarely used. Lily cleared a space behind jars of preserves, piling old blankets into a nest. She smuggled milk and raw chicken from the kitchen, mashing the meat into bits the cubs could eat. They resisted at first, but hunger won out. As they lapped milk from her fingers, she named them. "Your Titan," she said to the biggest, his fur darkest. "Your Nova," to the female with a white patch. "Blaze," to the gray male who growled loudest. And "Your Raven," to the smallest, his eyes bright with curiosity. That night, as Lily curled up beside them, a sense of purpose bloomed in her chest, stronger than her grief, fiercer than her fear. "We're a family now," she whispered. But as sleep claimed her, Titan lifted his tiny head and let out a single trembling howl, a sound that pierced the stillness and jolted Abby awake upstairs. The voiceover cut in. One act of kindness set a chain of events in motion, one that would test a town, a girl, and the wolves she dared to love. What happens next? Keep watching and tell us. Would you risk everything for a pack of outcasts? 2 years had passed since that fateful spring morning in 2015, when Lily Harper carried 4 orphaned wolf cubs into her life. By the fall of 2017, Pinewood Valley had settled into its usual rhythm, crisp air sweeping down from the mountains, leaves turning gold and crimson, the distant crack of rifles signaling the start of hunting season. Inside Abby Harper's cabin, life had taken on a strange new normal. The cellar, once a dusty storage space for preserves, had become a hidden sanctuary. Titan, Nova, Blaze, and Raven were no longer helpless pups. They'd grown into lean, powerful wolves, their playful yips replaced by low growls and restless energy. Lily, now 7, spent every spare moment with them, feeding them scraps she smuggled from the kitchen, teaching them to stalk small game in the yard under cover of night, marveling at how they greeted her with gentle nudges and licks despite their wild nature. But secrets that big couldn't stay buried forever in a town as small as Pinewood. Abby had noticed the missing food, half a roast here, a loaf of bread there, and the twigs tangled in Lily's hair after her walks. She'd confronted her granddaughter once, her voice stern but trembling. "What are you hiding, child? This ain't a game." Lily had just stared at her with those wide hazel eyes, silent as ever, and Abby let it drop. She told herself it was childish mischief, nothing more. Deep down, though, she felt a gnawing unease, a memory from decades past she'd buried beneath years of pies and prayers, a shadow she refused to face. That unease erupted into terror one chilly October night in 2017. The moon hung low, shrouded in clouds, when a sound unlike any other tore through Pinewood Valley. A chorus of howls, dozens strong, rising from the forest like a wave crashing against the town's edges. It wasn't the lone cry of a wolf on the hunt. It was a symphony, mournful and majestic, as if the woods themselves had found a voice. Inside the cabin, Lily bolted upright in bed, her heart racing. She knew those howls. Not just Titan's deep rumble or Blaze's sharp bark, but something bigger, wilder, calling out from beyond her little pack. Downstairs, Abby clutched her quilt, whispering, "Lord help us," as the sound rattled the windows. Across town, folks stumbled onto porches, rifles in hand, their faces pale with a fear they couldn't name. By morning, the valley buzzed with dread. Hank Grayson, a grizzled shepherd who tended flocks on the outskirts, was found dead near his pasture, his throat torn open, blood soaking the frostbitten grass. Sheriff Jonah Pierce, a weathered man with a face like carved oak, roped off the scene as townsfolk gathered, murmuring prayers and curses. No wolf tracks marred the earth, no claw marks scored the dirt, just a single, chilling detail. A crude chit into a nearby pine, its lines deep and fresh, mirroring the scar Lily had seen on the she-wolf 2 years before. Caleb Cal Dawson was the first to speak, his voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. "This ain't natural," he growled, his limp more pronounced as he paced. "Wolves don't kill like that and leave no trace. Something's awake out there, and I'd bet my rifle it's tied to that Harper girl." Lily heard the whispers when she walked to school that day, her small frame hunched against the cold. Mothers pulled their children closer. Shopkeepers fell silent as she passed. At recess, a boy spat at her feet, sneering, "You're the wolf witch, ain't you?" She ignored them, but the words stung deeper than she'd admit. That afternoon, she slipped into the cellar, her hands shaking as she unlatched the door. Titan greeted her with a low whine, his massive head pressing against her chest. But when she ran her fingers through his fur, they came away sticky, blood dark and fresh, clinging to his muzzle. "Titan," she whispered, her voice breaking, "what did you do?" He didn't growl or snap, he just looked at her, amber eyes pleading, and let out a soft, sorrowful howl that echoed in the damp space. Nova, Blaze, and Raven joined in, their voices weaving a melody of guilt and grief. Lily sank to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You promised," she sobbed, clutching his fur. "You promised you wouldn't hurt anyone." In her mind, the echoes stirred, not words, but a flood of feeling, confusion, fear, a desperate need to protect. It wasn't Titan's guilt she sensed, it was something else, something outside their bond. She wiped her eyes, resolve hardening her young face. "I believe you," she said, though doubt gnawed at her. That night, she stayed in the cellar, curled among the wolves, their warmth a shield against the growing storm. The storm broke the next day when Cal stormed into Sheriff Pierce's office, slamming a muddy boot on the desk. "Found wolf prints near the Harper place," he said, his eyes blazing. "Big ones, too big for strays. That girl's hiding something and it's killing us." Jonah rubbed his temples, his voice calm but strained. "We don't know it's her wolves, Cal. Could be a new pack moving in." Cal laughed, bitter and cold. "You want to bet lives on that, Sheriff? My boy died 'cause we waited too long last time. I'm ending this tonight." He limped out, leaving a trail of dirt and fury. Back at the cabin, Abby cornered Lily as dusk fell, her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Tell me the truth, Lily," she said, her voice trembling. "What's in that cellar?" Lily met her gaze, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Family." Abby's face paled, but before she could respond, a knock rattled the door. Jonah, his badge glinting in the fading light. "We've got trouble," he said. "Cal's rounding up a posse. They're coming for you, and whatever you're hiding." The voiceover cut in. The echoes were awake, and Pinewood Valley was about to face a reckoning. Was Titan a killer or a scapegoat? What secrets tied the wolves to Lily's fate? Don't go anywhere, we're just getting started. And tell us in the comments, if you were Lily, would you fight for your wolves or let them go? What's your call? The air in Pinewood Valley grew heavier as October 2017 bled into November, the golden leaves giving way to bare branches that clawed at the gray sky. Inside Abby Harper's cabin, tension coiled like a spring ready to snap. Lily had barely slept since Hank Grayson's death, her nights spent in the cellar with Titan, Nova, Blaze, and Raven, whispering reassurances to ease their restless pacing. The wolves sensed the storm brewing beyond the walls. Cal Dawson's posse was no idle threat. Abby, too, felt it. Her hands shook as she kneaded dough for a pie she'd never finish, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask aloud. The knock Sheriff Jonah Pierce had delivered still echoed in her ears. "They're coming for you, and whatever you're hiding." She'd looked at Lily then, her granddaughter's quiet family, ringing with a truth she couldn't ignore. That truth unraveled the next morning when a battered pickup rolled up the dirt path to the cabin. Out stepped Eleanor Pierce, Abby's older sister, a ghost from 40 years past. Ellie was taller than Abby, her hair a stark white cropped short, her sharp blue eyes shadowed by decades of secrets. She wore a faded field jacket patched at the elbows, a relic of her days as a wildlife biologist. Abby froze at the sight, flour dusting her apron like snow. "Ellie?" she breathed, disbelief warring with dread. "What are you doing here?" Ellie's lips twitched into a thin smile, but her gaze darted to Lily, who stood clutching the doorframe. "I heard about the wolves," she said, her voice low and steady. "And the girl. We need to talk, alone." Inside, over a pot of bitter coffee, Ellie dropped a bombshell that shattered the fragile peace. "I worked for Echo Protocol in the 70s, she began, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "A government project, top secret. We bred wolves, enhanced their intelligence, trained them for reconnaissance. The she-wolf with the X scar? She was one of ours, designation Alpha 7. She escaped when the program shut down, but not before they branded her." Abby's face drained of color, her hands clenching the table. "You're saying Lily's wolves? They're from your experiment?" Ellie nodded grimly. "Their mother was. And if they've inherited her traits, they're smarter than any wild pack. That's why they're different, why they bonded with her." Lily listened from the hallway, her small body pressed against the wall, heart pounding. The echoes she'd felt since finding the cubs, the flashes of emotion, the whispers of memory, suddenly made sense. But Ellie wasn't done. "There's more," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Cal's boy didn't die by wolves. Not naturally. I think his father, Old Man Dawson, staged it. He was part of the cleanup crew when Echo shut down, knew too much, hated what we'd created. A rabid wolf was a convenient excuse to bury the truth and fuel his vendetta." Abby slammed her mug down, coffee sloshing over the edge. "That's insane, Ellie." You've got no proof?" Ellie's eyes hardened. "I've got enough. And Lily's in danger, not just from Cal, but from the ones who never stopped hunting Echo's legacy." Before Abby could argue, the roar of engines cut through the quiet, trucks rumbling up the path, headlights piercing the dusk. Cal Dawson led the charge, a dozen men at his back, torches flickering in their hands. "Abby Harper," he bellowed, his voice raw with fury. "Bring out the girl and those damn wolves or we burn it all down." Lily darted to the cellar, her breath hitching as she unlatched the door. Titan growled low, sensing the threat, while Blaze pawed at the ground, his injured leg from a past scuffle trembling under his weight. "Stay quiet," Lily whispered, her hands buried in Nova's fur. But the wolves wouldn't stay hidden, not tonight. Outside, Cal's men circled the cabin, their shouts rising over the wind. Sam Carter, Lily's soft-spoken schoolteacher, stepped forward from the crowd, his face pale but resolute. "Cal, this ain't right," he pleaded. "She's a kid. Let's talk this out." Cal rounded on him, spitting in the dirt. "You're soft, Carter, always have been. Those wolves killed Hank, and she's protecting him." Sam hesitated, then dropped his own confession. "I called Ellie. Thought she could help. Thought she'd prove they're not killers." "I didn't mean for this." Abby's eyes widened, betrayal flashing across her face. "You brought this to my door?" she hissed. But there was no time for answers. A torch sailed through the air, smashing against the barn beside the cabin. Flames roared to life, licking up the dry wood with a hunger that matched Cal's rage. Lily screamed as the wolves burst from the cellar, instinct overriding her pleas. Blaze charged the nearest man, his teeth snapping inches from flesh before a gunshot rang out, Cal's rifle striking Blaze's flank. The wolf yelped, collapsing in the dirt, his blood pooling beneath him as he snarled defiantly. Titan and Nova flanked Lily, their howls a desperate warning, while Raven darted into the shadows, his small form vanishing in the chaos. Ellie grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her toward the forest. "Run!" she shouted, but Lily broke free, rushing to Blaze's side. "I won't leave him!" she cried, tears streaming down her face. That's when she saw it, a glint of metal on Nova's neck, a tiny tracker blinking red. "You lied," Lily yelled at Ellie, her voice breaking. "You're selling them!" Ellie's face twisted with guilt, but she didn't deny it. "It's bigger than you know," she muttered, backing away as Cal's men closed in. Abby fired a warning shot from her old shotgun, the blast echoing over the valley. "Get off my land!" she roared, buying Lily a precious moment. With Blaze limping beside her, Lily led the wolves into the trees, their howls fading into the night. The fire spread, engulfing the barn and licking at the cabin's edges. A beacon for whatever hunted them next, the voiceover broke through. Betrayal cast its shadow over Pinewood, and the echoes grew louder. Was Ellie friend or foe? Could Sam's good intentions excuse his mistake? The wolves were running, but to safety or slaughter. Stay tuned and hit the comments. If someone you trusted sold you out for a greater good, would you forgive them? Let's hear it. The forest swallowed Lily Harper and her wolves as night deepened over Pinewood Valley, the glow of the burning barn fading behind them like a dying star. November 2017 had turned brutal. The wind howled through Black Ridge Wilderness, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. Lily stumbled over roots and rocks, her breath ragged, her small hands guiding Blaze, whose flank oozed crimson from Cal Dawson's bullet. Titan led the way, his massive form cutting through the underbrush while Nova stayed close, the tracker on her neck blinking like a traitor's heartbeat. Raven darted ahead, his nimble frame scouting the shadows, but the pack was fraying, wounded, hunted, and betrayed. Lily's mind raced with Ellie's words. It's bigger than you know. The Echo Protocol, the X-Scar, the intelligence in Titan's eyes. It all pointed to a truth she couldn't grasp. But one thing was clear. They weren't safe. The hum of engines echoed faintly behind them. Cal's posse, or something worse, closing in. She pushed deeper into the wilderness, her sneakers sinking into mud, until she reached a cave near a thundering waterfall. a secret spot she'd found months ago. "In here," she whispered, ushering the wolves inside. The cave's damp walls glistened in the dark, muffling the world outside, but it couldn't silence the dread gnawing at her chest. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Lily huddled against Titan, his warmth a fragile comfort. Blaze lay panting nearby, his breath shallow, while Nova and Raven paced restlessly. Then Titan stiffened, ears pricking, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Footsteps crunched outside. Two men, not Cal's rough hunters but strangers in tactical gear, their voices clipped and cold. "4 prime specimens," one muttered, peering into the cave with a flashlight. "And the girl, bonus." The other unfolded a collapsible cage, his dart gun gleaming. "Take the alpha first, the rest'll follow once he's down." Lily's heart stopped as she saw the tracker's red light reflected in their eyes. "Ellie's doing." "No!" Lily cried, leaping to her feet, placing herself between Titan and the men. "Leave them alone!" The leader, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek, sighed, his tone oddly gentle. "Move aside, kid. We're not here to hurt him. Just relocate him somewhere they'll be appreciated." Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They're not yours. They're my family." The second man, broader and impatient, laughed. A harsh, grating sound. "Family? They're wolves, girl, worth a fortune to the right buyers." "Smart ones like these?" "Million." Before Lily could respond, the leader fired his dart gun. She gasped as the sting hit her shoulder, a small dart protruding from her jacket. The cave spun, her knees buckling, but as she fell, Titan roared, a sound that shook the stone walls, and launched himself at the man. 200 pounds of fury crashed into him, sending the dart gun skittering across the floor. Nova charged the second man, her jaws sinking into his arm as he drew a pistol. Blaze struggled to his feet, limping forward while Raven darted in, snapping at the leader's legs. The cave erupted in chaos. Growls, screams, the crack of gunfire deafening in the confined space. The leader pulled a knife, slashing at Titan's side. Blood sprayed, staining the rock red, but Titan's jaws closed on the man's throat, silencing his cries. The second man fired wildly, a bullet tearing through Nova's belly. She yelped, collapsing in a heap, her white-streaked fur darkening with blood. Lily, fighting the sedative's haze, crawled to her, sobbing, "Nova, no!" Blaze, fueled by rage, lunged at the shooter, tackling him to the ground, but another shot rang out, piercing his chest. He staggered, falling beside Nova, their blood mingling as he whimpered a final, broken howl. Raven darted forward, small but fierce, leaping at the second man's face. A third shot echoed, and the little wolf dropped lifeless, his body crumpling at Lily's feet. "Raven!" she screamed, her voice raw, but the sedative pulled her under. As darkness closed in, Titan stood over her, blood dripping from his wounds, his amber eyes locked on hers, a silent vow to protect her to the end. Then headlights pierced the cave mouth. Sheriff Jonah Pierce's cruiser, followed by Abby's shouts and Cal Dawson's heavy limp. Cal fired first, his rifle bullet striking the second man's shoulder, dropping him. Jonah tackled the leader, cuffing him as he bled out from Titan's bite. Abby rushed to Lily, cradling her unconscious form, tears streaming down her weathered face. "She's alive!" she cried, pulling the dart free. But the wolves... Titan sank to the ground, his breathing labored, blood pooling beneath him. Nova and Blaze lay still, their howls silenced forever, while Raven's small body rested at Lily's side. A family torn apart. Cal knelt beside Titan, his rifle clattering to the stone. "I was wrong," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "You're no killer. You're a damn hero." Titan's eyes flickered, meeting Cal's, and he let out one last howl, a requiem, mournful and defiant, joined faintly by voices from the forest beyond. Then he licked Lily's hand, his tongue warm against her skin, and went still. Abby sobbed, clutching her granddaughter, while Cal's tears fell onto the wolf he'd spent decades hating. Days later, the valley mourned and rebuilt. The men were operatives for a black market ring tipped off by Ellie, who vanished after the fire, her betrayal a wound that wouldn't heal. Nova's pups, born months later in a sanctuary named Echo's Haven, carried her legacy, smart, uncanny, howling each night as if remembering their lost kin. Cal quit hunting, carving an X on Titan's grave, but he never spoke of his son's death, leaving whispers of doubt. Lily, now a biologist years later, stood at the sanctuary's edge, her voice soft. "Your echoes live on." The voiceover closed. A requiem sang their farewell, but their sacrifice reshaped a valley. Was Cal redeemed? Did Ellie deserve forgiveness? Do wolves have souls? Hit that like button if you cried, and comment, what would you sacrifice for family? See you next time.